This is my first time making an unscripted video without having someone else on to help me along. I'm going to try my best to have this video make sense and have an overall point, but I'm not very good at this thing, so we'll see how it goes. I've been thinking about all the reasons why we seem to always just not have enough time to do the things we want to do, and I think we all know the reason to some extent, being that we do too many things, and it's always things that we don't really think about, usually. It was actually pretty convenient timing. Today, Discord came out with this new Wrapped thing that's sort of like Spotify Wrapped, but Discord, and a bunch of my friends were posting their numbers, and they were all pretty consistent with each other. They were all 100,000 messages sent, and like 2,000 hours spent in VC. I couldn't get my own numbers because I have privacy settings that disable this, but I divided these numbers and found that averages out to 5 hours per day in VC. And I've been in VC with these people before, and I know that the vast majority of time that they spend in VC is made of playing games and watching random videos. That's like almost a full-time job's worth of time spent on all that. And even though I don't have my own statistics, I'm sure my numbers aren't very encouraging either. And social media is like the big thing that people point to. But there's also things like TV shows. Like, right now people don't really watch movies as much, they tend to watch TV shows, and those are way longer runtime than movies most of the time. And I think a lot of the time we don't really think about how much time it takes to watch a TV show or a video series. It's like, oh, this TV show is very short, it's only 12 episodes long. You could watch that no problem. And people are talking about Silksong being a short game, and I looked at the runtime and I was like, short? That is like a week's worth of full-time job. On the other hand, I also have some friends that are like, they say that they can only watch 1 hour of YouTube tops per week, and they only appear on Discord like once every few days, and they leave like 3 messages and then they dip again. At first that sounds like one of two things. Either, oh my god, is your work really killing you that much? Like, what are they doing to you that you literally can't do anything? Or it's like maybe they're isolating or they don't want to talk. But I think the truth is that we just have a lot of time in our day that are just unaccounted for because we don't know what we're doing. I kept up a habit of logging the time that I spent on things that I consider productive for like 4 or 5 months this year, and it was pretty striking and sobering to me that there was just so much time in my day where I don't know where it went. I have like really bad time blindness. I cannot keep track of what time it is. So it's not surprising in the slightest that this is the case, but it's also a bit concerning. Aside from eating and sleeping, there's like 6 hours tops in my day where at the end of the day, I know how those 6 hours were spent. And I'm pretty sure a lot of that mystery time is just filled up with things like social media and watching things. But at least in my experience, a lot of it is also thinking about that random garbage. I'm very susceptible to things that are intentionally designed to be addictive, especially if I'm like burned out or dysfunctional. Last year around April, when I was deep in the depths of burnout and dysfunction at university, it was my last semester of university and nearing the end, and I wasn't used to the climate, it was making me depressed, and with all my functioning issues, I was just really not wanting to do anything. And my friend gifted me Stardew Valley, and over the course of the next 3 months, I clocked over 600 hours in that game. And I didn't even look at my own time because I just didn't want to know. I knew it was bad, but I just didn't want to know how bad it was. And then my friend told me, because she saw my numbers on Steam, and she was like, what the heck? Are you okay? And so I took that as a lesson to watch what I'm doing and make sure it doesn't get that bad. But because of the way I am, I do have binging tendencies in general. So it's good to keep this in mind and try and put a cap on all that binge time. And I do try to, with varying success. But especially when I'm thinking about some sort of fictional universe that's like very expansive and very detailed with a lot of problems, there's a lot of unaccounted for time spent thinking about all of that. And V3 Aftermath is actually an example of that, born out of way too much thinking about a fictional universe. And on a related note, there's been a big thing that happened in the Fangan community recently, which I won't get into because I think enough has been said on the topic already, but Twitter was exploding over it, as Twitter tends to do, and I don't have a Twitter account very intentionally, so I was just watching people on Discord freak out over it, and I saw people saying that they spent their entire day just watching Twitter and following the whole thing, and I'm still seeing multiple hour rage conversations about this. In fact, one is happening right now as I'm recording this, and it made me think of that video that CGP Grey made over a decade ago about how angry ideas spread the best on the internet and tend to reach a state of stability where everyone is angry about something and the idea just keeps on going and perpetrating forever because it's so maddening. That video is really well made and really explains the concept clearly. You should watch it if you haven't. But yeah, it's all this time that we spend thinking about these things and just rehashing things and just churning out more and more thoughts about these things that are basically designed to keep us thinking about it for as long as possible. I don't really think about the thing that happened to the Fangan community, but the same principle applies to the things that I do think about. And the same thing applies to other bigger topics as well, like politics, that people think about. People let the President of the United States live rent-free in their brain, regardless of whether they can do anything at all about it or not, and they don't spend that energy thinking about things happening immediately around them. I feel like the 48 hours or so after Election Day is like an unofficial holiday where everyone just talks about how terrible the election made them feel. And the same thing happens whenever a major thing happens on the news that makes everyone upset. It takes time and energy out of everyone's day and nothing good comes out of it. And we all know by now that the news is designed to do that to us, and social media is designed to do that to us as well. This is the life we live now, with the structures built around us trying to siphon the energy and the time out of us. And this applies to productive things as well. The only way to have a chance at getting a decent paying job is to spend basically a job's worth of time on applying to jobs, hundreds of them, endless amounts of applications. And I'm guilty of not doing that because I hate that, and I don't want to advertise myself in ways that are necessarily dishonest in order to be competitive, but that's the world we live in. And I don't think full-time jobs necessarily need the 8 hours a day to churn out the productivity that they want from workers. There's been studies of some companies shortening their work hours and getting as much if not more productivity from their employees, but 8 hours a day is how it works, and that's the world we live in. And my friends in university are working 15 hours a day because the university and whatever else they're engaged in don't know how to respect a person's time, and they can't even expect the future to be better because they don't know what the future will be like. And all I can say to them is, you will survive. But I think it's time for us to take a step back and be like, is there fundamentally a good reason why we're spending time the way we are? It's very easy for us to think that what we're spending our time on is necessary. Not even helpful, but just necessary. It's necessary to ace the SAT or ACT in high school so that you can get into a good college. It's necessary to get a 3.5 or higher GPA in college so that your first job will want you. But then you get to the points where you thought your time would pay off, and it's like, oh, the pandemic happened, so some people couldn't take the SAT, so they're just not looking at it. Oh, thanks. Yeah, that was a good entire summer that I spent on that. Oh, I'm starting to apply to jobs now and no one cares about my GPA and everyone wants to hear about my 1 to 2 years of prior experience that I don't have. My friend who has a full-time job complained that the Microsoft Teams notifications were always popping off on her phone, and even on vacation, she would just be tortured by all the intermittent conversations that she would have with her coworkers about work. And I'm like, is this really helping anyone? Do you need Teams on your phone? They always say to not check your email on vacation. And it's understandably hard to do because what if something goes wrong and I have to address it? My coworkers need help. I'm not gonna leave them hanging because I want to, I don't know, hang out at the beach or something. Obviously the work problem that my coworkers are stressing over is more important, right? But at the end of the day, the sky isn't going to fall, and the fact is that you will be a worse worker because you're in this stressed and unhappy state. And not to mention, because you're in this state, you can't do other things that will help get you out of this state, and it's preventing you from doing things you want to do. A similar thing happens to another friend who refuses to go to sleep until he's been convinced that all of his friends are fine and don't need his emotional support. And it's like, because you do this, you have less sleep and less downtime, and are overall more unhappy because of these things, and your friends will be more unhappy because you're more unhappy. But somehow it just feels so important in the moment to make sure that your friend is okay, even though you know your friend will be okay. And it's not like you're the only person in the world who can comfort them, and it's not like people are the only thing that can comfort them. In fact, a lot of the time and their own thoughts will do it for you. But these are all things that just feel so necessary to us. And it wasn't always like this. It used to be the case, like within our own lifetimes and childhoods, that you would see a particular friend like at most 3 hours in a day when you either met them in school or arranged a time and spent physical time together in person. And if this was within our lifetimes, you would maybe text a bit afterward, not like constantly for the rest of the day like we do now. Or if this was before our lifetimes, you would just not talk at all for the rest of the day, and people were fine with that. And now they're not fine with that. And it used to be the case that your work problems would extend to your emails, but there wasn't like instant messaging that was designed specifically for work. And even before that, before email, there was no correspondence outside of work, and work was completely confined to those 8 hours that you would show up in person. And things got done and problems got solved. So the fact that we feel an obligation to spend our time in this way feels really artificial and it feels like we were set up. And it's not like anyone has like an evil plan to do this to us to make our lives worse. It's that this is the natural consequence of how the world is moving. And our bodies and minds don't like the way that the world is moving. And the biggest resource of ours that falls victim to this is time. Because all of this takes up more time than we realize, especially small things like instant messaging that takes up so little time it seems like, but in fact, it adds up and it takes up so much of our day that we don't realize it. Videos that are under 10 minutes long take up more of my time than videos that are half an hour or an hour long, because I don't think of it as seriously as time expenditure. 10 hours of TV show feels like way less time than 10 hours of movie, because it feels like we're spending half an hour at a time. And it feels like the advice of plotting all your responsibilities into quadrants of like urgent and important, urgent and not important, not urgent but important, and not urgent and not important is a bit hard to follow because, well, how do you know how important something is when half of the time either someone lies to you about how important it is in order to get you to do it, or no one knows how important it is. You can make something sound as important or as unimportant as you need. So they say that you should do this pretty regularly, and I think especially for young people we should do this fairly often. We need to ask ourselves what we really want, and we can probably come up with an immediate answer, but once we have that answer we need to ask, why do we want that? What do we really want fundamentally underneath that? I want to make a game. Why do I want to make a game? Well, there's a few reasons. I want to prove to others, but mostly to myself, that I'm actually capable of making something that other people will enjoy and find value in, because my idea of being worthwhile and spending my time and my existence on this earth in a way that's meaningful is tied to my ability to create. And besides that, I just also experience a strong desire to create intrinsically. Not particularly a specific kind of creation, which is why I make games, because it encompasses so many different kinds of creation, but just creation in general. And I can't really explain exactly why I want to create things so badly, but I think these two answers are fundamental enough to work with. One of leading a worthwhile existence, and one of intrinsically wanting to create. And now I can ask, is there a better way than what I'm doing right now in order to do this? And the answer is probably yeah. I could be doing things that are smaller and easier to create and provide a similar amount of value. That's why I'm never gonna do something like make an anime by myself, because that's way too much work for a very small, relatively small amount of value per amount of time spent, but I'm still crazy enough to want hand-animated sequences in my video games, which I should probably rethink given what I've literally just discussed right now. And probably the most common example of this type of questioning what you want is, I want to do well in school. Why? Because I want a job. Why? Because I want money. Why? Because I want to live. And at each stage of these, you can be like, is this the only option? Obviously not, but all the other options seem like they're obviously not it, right? But how much time have we committed to thinking about all these other options? Do we know that they're not viable, or do we just assume that based on like 5 seconds of thinking about them? Maybe there are options that we haven't heard about because everyone around us have locked in on the standard set of options as well. On a smaller scale as well, my dad keeps asking me whenever he sees me on my phone, do you really need to be up to date with whatever's going on in there? And I'm like, no. And he's like, well, put it down. And I'm like, I don't wanna. And sometimes I have good or at least understandable reasons not to put it down. But I have to always remember to be aware of that, be self-aware, and know exactly what I'm doing and why. And hopefully with that knowledge, I can do something about the way I'm spending my time and see if I can take out some of the garbage. I do this sometimes with Discord where I'll realize that I'm spending too much time checking a particular server and I'll mute it. And then, oh my god, it's been 3 weeks and I forgot about the server, and literally nothing has changed. A lot of the time I was barely talking in there anyway, and most of what I was doing was people watching, which is something I do like to do and do way too much. And it is helpful. I do learn a lot about how people work and what people think, but the people watching often outlasts the learning phase, and I just keep on doing it after I've learned everything I needed. And that's when it's helpful to step back and be like, is this helping anything? And the answer is no, and I turn it off. It's been an ongoing active decision on my part to not have a Twitter account, and it was a minor inconvenience when I was trying to advertise my casting call, but I still managed to do my casting and I still don't have a Twitter account, and nothing of value has been lost. I'm spending less time on job applications and more time on improving my skills and improving my sort of portfolio that I can show to potential employers, and this is a much less efficient way of getting a job, but what it does do is make me a better worker, which means that I won't suck as much at my future job. And my strat there isn't necessarily perfect, I should be applying to jobs more, but the point is that I'm trying to ponder over these decisions instead of doing the obvious thing, which is to endlessly apply to jobs until someone picks me up. Obviously, I'm not very good at this whole time management thing, but I'm trying, and part of that is trying to understand it better and understand where my time has gone in my time blindness. And I think other people can afford to think about this more as well. And I'll also mention, because I can hear my friends telepathically yelling at me right now, that it's important to consider rest in time expenditure, but not just any rest, conscious rest designed to be effective. And not watching stuff and reading what other people say and blinking and going, wait, where did the time go? Because at least in my experience, that's not restful. Because if you're only half conscious and you're putting your mind in a state that's conducive to unhealthy doom scrolling and not conducive to intelligent thought, that means that the next time that you try to do work, it's not going to work because your mind is not in the right state. So this is something that I really need to think about and figure out and work on. And I would recommend that other people do the same, is figure out a state of activity in which you're poising your mind in such a way that the next time that you try to do work, your mind will be ready. And not only does this mean you'll be better rested and work better, but you'll also spend less time working because you're more efficient. And if you're required to be at your 9 to 5 for the full amount of time, then you can just spend the rest of the time resting your brain again. At least for knowledge work. I don't know about working at McDonald's or something like that. But I imagine that those kinds of work can also benefit from some mental things like spending your mental energy in a different way, rethinking things and having an easier time focusing and not hating your life as much. I think there are a lot of ways that people can reclaim the time they're spending in a world that really wants them to spend as much time as possible and always feel like we don't have enough time to do anything. There's definitely definitely a lot I haven't covered in this little talk, and I hope that people will have more thoughts in the comments on this topic. I'm serious about that. Take a second and think about this. Think of something you could say related to this topic and put it in the comments. Let's make a real good attempt at having a conversation about this and see what we learn.